Welcome to this special episode of Decoding Gender Insights from Thought Leaders. Population First is observing the 16 days of activism against gender based violence, a global campaign from November 25th to December 10th, with a 16-part podcast series that delves into the intersection of gender and critical social issues. Since inception in 2005, Population First has focused on challenging the gendered attitudes that devalue girls and women, fuel discrimination, and perpetuate gender based violence. Gender and climate change in India are deeply connected, with women, especially in rural areas, disproportionately affected by resource scarcity and displacement. Limited access to land, finances, and decision making hampers their adaptability. Yet, women are vital to community based climate solutions. Gender sensitive policies and empowerment through education and resources are crucial for inclusive, resilient responses to climate change. Joining us today are two career journalists, both Ladli awardees, Nidhi Jambal and Roli Srivastava, who have highlighted through their exceptional body of work the intersectionality between gender and climate change. Over to our experts.
I'm so glad that Ladli and UNFP is actually organizing this kind of podcast around gender dimension of climate change. I think both Roli and I, we keep traveling to rural India. We keep doing stories around climate change. And specifically, as I think women journalists, we are able to get a lot of nuances around how climate change doesn't really impact everyone in the same manner. And like you mentioned that women and girls are more vulnerable, are more exposed to the hazards because of climate change. I just want to talk about a very small thing that I noticed while I was doing one of the stories in Sundarbans. And in Sundarbans, most of the men, because it's a delta region and you have sea levels rising and slowly and slowly islands are actually going underwater. So most of the young male members, they migrate from there and they migrate as far as Tamil Nadu and Kerala, which actually leaves behind women to take care of the older people and to take care of the children. So the kind of emotional, mental burden these women face, because there are a lot of women I met who said that, almost every year the sea is coming closer to us. And we know one day it's going to reach our home also. And we don't know where we will go because men can migrate to other places, so-called safer areas, but we are left behind to take care of our families. So I think apart from the physical and livelihood and other challenges, there is a huge emotional and mental burden which women are bearing because of climate change. And I'm sure Roli can also add to it.
Yeah, surely, Nidhi, and thanks for the lovely introductions. And the day we are recording it is also the day COP29 begins. So an opportune time, I think, to discuss gender and climate. So yes, like absolutely what Nidhi said, taking that forward, Nidhi, the migration becomes the most crucial element in how women bear the unequal impact of these increasing climate risks. And but at the same time, just taking it a step further, that women have become farm managers, which we all know, but the decisions do not rest with them. They are taking care of the farms, of the agricultural fields. They are the workers because the men have migrated, since agriculture is no longer a lucrative even a regular business option. So men migrate to cities, which means that women are taking care of the farms and all that. But does that bring in with it any ownership rights on the land? Does it bring with it the decision-making responsibility to the women? That's still lacking. So they are at best farm workers with no gains otherwise, no material gains otherwise. Most of the farmers, when we imagine farmers, we still think of men. We don't imagine women as farmers as yet. Like most people will imagine a man holding an axe and working on the fields, but it's the woman who's doing all of that, because the men, like you said, Nidhi, have left for the cities, right? Most of the cases. But these new responsibilities, which are, of course, like you mentioned, have added to their emotional and mental burden, also their physical labor, but has not added in terms of the rights that they enjoy, what seeds will be sown, what techniques will be used, those decisions will still rest with the man who is in touch with them and will say. So if they want to try out climate resilient farming methods, for example, several states in India like Orissa are doing millet projects. Most states are doing it, but Orissa started it way back. So a lot of women are taking forward those initiatives for the government. But the decision or not, whether you can use these hardy crops to tide over climate extremes or whatever, does not rest with the women. In most of the cases, it's the men who will decide. So while women are have emerged as the climate mitigation warriors on these farms and fields, they still don't have the authority. And I think those are the conversations that will gradually take center stage. Have you also come across something like that, Nidhi, in your reporting?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, especially in our context, I also feel what makes women, the risks are higher for women and girls in this part of the world is also because of a lot of socio-cultural reasons. We all know that in this part of the world, possibly the chances of a newborn baby girl surviving are lower than a newborn baby boy surviving. We know a girl child reaching education up to class 8 is much lower than a boy getting that kind of education. We also know the livelihood or the work opportunities for women are much lower than men. Then what happens in a climate change context is, because we say climate change is a threat multiplier, it is affecting health, it is affecting education, it is affecting water resources, it is affecting farming. So because of that, in all these cases, the number of times a woman gets more marginalized because of climate change increases multiple times. But I also agree with one of the points, Roli, that you said, that on one hand, women are getting affected by climate change. But in my reportage, I have also come across so many women in rural India who are actually adapting and who are actually also giving the solutions for climate change. Because, we all understand, I mean, our grandmothers knew how to take one roti and make something out of it to ensure everybody eats. They knew how to take a piece of cloth and ensure all the children get clothes. So somewhere I think women also know that if you have these limited resources, how do you make the best use of them for as many people as you can? So I personally feel a lot of climate change solutions are coming from women. Unfortunately, we are not recognizing it and we are not giving them the voice and the space, I guess, and the recognition that they need.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. They are clearly leading this, and but they are also at the sharp end of this climate crisis in the sense that they're coming up with solutions is something that women have learned how to do because they have managed, like you mentioned, with limited resources. But at the same time, it's a burden because they are like, I remember one story from Satara where women were mortgaging their gold. Why? To buy fodder. Why are they mortgaging their gold to buy fodder? Because fodder is expensive. Why is fodder expensive? Because farmlands are no longer, as in more and more farmers are growing lesser of fodder crops. Why are they growing lesser of fodder crops? Because their dependence on cash crops has increased because the yields have been impacted because of climate extremes. So it's wheels within wheels, but the eventual burden of keeping your cows and buffaloes alive because they need fodder, that eventual burden is on the woman who's then selling her gold to buy fodder so that these animals can be fed. Why is it important for the animals to be fed? Because the children get milk, curd, ghee, all of that because they have animals in the house. So one woman told me that the gold is not yielding anything if I'm keeping it in my house, but these cows are yielding me a life every day. So I will happily let go of the gold to keep my cows alive. So is it a choice that she's happily made to let go of her gold? It's something that you don't have a choice about. Like the only material possession that you have that can be monetized is possibly the gold that your parents gave you at the time of marriage. Somebody who had mortgaged the gold was a son's gift after he got his first job. So there is an emotional attachment that women have to jewelry. And
Right.
tell that to imagine a climate crisis and how it's playing out in the lives of in small households of rural India. So yeah, as in great that women are coming up with solutions, but it also kind of is indicative of the kind of rights and incentives that they need to be provided. Uh, let's celebrate the solutions that they're coming up with, but at the same time ensure that these, like you said, Nidhi, that it's invisibilized. Let's not kind of invisibilize these efforts and these leadership qualities that women are showing in mitigating a climate in their role as climate mitigators right now.
Absolutely. I think also the reason for us to recognize these solutions that are coming out from rural women around climate change is because they can actually feed into your policies.
Absolutely.
The idea is that why we as journalists, I mean, you record so many stories on the migration story through gender lens of climate change. I try and do from my side also is because we want that these learnings, because rural women are generally seen as illiterate, unpad hai, gawar hai, unko kuch samajh nahi aata. But I think when we record these kind of stories, we also recognize the wealth of knowledge these women have and which needs to feed into the policy. I want to give one small example. Last year, Ministry of Women and Child Development, did got a scoping study done on how climate change is affecting women and children. This is the first time in India they've tried doing this kind of a study based on the different agroecological regions. And if you read that report, one of the statements in the report says that never have we tried to look at climate change from a gender lens. So, which is why when we are trying to find information, research material on how climate change is affecting women, girls, and children, there isn't enough research also to put in your scoping study. So, I think it's important, and I'm very glad, like even a podcast like this or UNFP and Lardli is trying to bring people together to at least document and talk about these issues, because climate change is such a huge threat that all this knowledge from field actually needs to feed into your policies. Otherwise, I mean, we all know what's happening, the way extreme events are rising and the way marginalized and vulnerable are getting more and more sidelined. It's going to be a big crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, we risk, even as media persons, we risk turning all these heat stories into that annual report where you'll stories of women walking long distances to fetch water, the wells being distant, and then women like trekking down those, really deep wells, risking their lives to fetch that half a bucket of water. And I think the next stories should then look at what has been done about it, and then the contrast shown that, okay, if the district administration has taken note and if things have changed, and things are, in some places, they are changing. And with the help of government schemes and all that, it's good to even highlight those, to put the spotlight on those solutions that have worked out with the help of the government, with the help of non-profits or whatever, so that these examples can be emulated elsewhere also. So it's like it's always it's not about doing a puff piece, oh, this did so well and it's so good, but it's also about showing that, okay, small solutions can work and can be emulated.
Totally. I think also the point that you talked about journalists and, how we need to go beyond the usual stories of climate change. Also, I think we keep jumping as journalists, we keep jumping from one story to the another. And we never try and revisit what has happened to something which we reported on, say, climate change and women, say, 2 years back. What has happened? Like there are stories of women who actually catch prawns and they stand in waist deep water every day for 8 to 10 hours, whether you're having your periods, whether you're feeling sick or anything like that, they're standing in that water. So those stories are important. We do those stories and tell that what is the gender angle of such stories. But it's also important to then figure out that from wherever we have reported, have any health centers been set up there Have there any been health studies specifically been initiated in that area to understand that if women are standing in a salty water for 8 to 10 hours every day, what is the impact on their health? Because once we have that kind of information, at least then one knows how to respond. Right now, I think it is all scattered. That we're talking of too many problems of climate change through a gender lens. But like you said, we also need to start chasing some stories, going back, revisiting some stories, and finding out what has happened after we reported a particular issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the follow-ups are the best stories, is what a senior journalist once told me, that following up on your past stories is the best form of journalism. All of us, of course, we are covering so many stories that we do kind of lose track, but yes, it's always a good reminder to go back to them, particularly to mainstream the gender and climate conversation, because the only way solutions will emerge if you keep talking about them, and you keep talking about them year after year. It's like in on the civic beat, we would say that potholes, there's so many potholes, and every year we are writing about the potholes, but then you have to write about it. It's not getting filled on its own. So
Right.
yeah.
No, I am so glad you pointed this out, and I really want to thank Migration Story. I was recently in Bihar, like in that story we did, and nobody really wants to talk about or report on this, carry these stories which they see as regular stories. हर साल तो होता है. Like if you want to do a story around how floods impact women in a far worse manner they would impact men. And it's very difficult to sell that story to legacy media because they feel, what's so new about it? Everybody knows it. But when you go to the field, like when I went to this camp in North Bihar, Paschim Champaran, which the migration story has carried also, you see women. I mean, my daughter is 17, and I saw a young girl over there. She was not more than 14 or 15, and she was carrying a 1 month old, highly malnourished baby in her lap, and she was sitting out in the open in front of a tarpaulin house which she had constructed. So I think these stories, maybe you can look at them and say, oh, ye to har saal hota hai, why should we talk about it? But like you said, like potholes, these are important things. You have to keep reporting on it. If there are women and girls who are getting badly affected because of floods every year, then it is maybe they could be pregnant. There are women who have to deliver babies, but you have water all around them. I think these are important stories, and I'm really glad some platforms like Migration Stories still think it important publish these kind of stories.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the endeavor. And thanks. That was a great story for us to kind of spotlight the human impact of a climate extreme. And I think a lot of portals are trying to do that right now. And it's just one step towards mainstreaming the subject. Yeah.
Thank you, Nidhi Jambal and Roli Srivastava, for the insightful and thought provoking conversation on gender and climate change. Viewers may share their reactions, queries, and observations in the comments section below. Please watch all the episodes and initiate gender conversations with your family, friends, colleagues, and community members.